Shanyong stood at the edge of the courtyard, his posture tall and steady. Yet his eyes were sharp and alert, scanning the far horizon as if searching for the faintest sign of movement. The first light of dawn spilled across the rooftops, painting the tiled surfaces in a soft golden hue. A thin layer of morning dew clung to the ground, making the stone beneath his feet glisten faintly. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the subtle fragrance of plum blossoms drifting from the nearby garden, a scent that seemed to calm the mind while sharpening the senses. From the far end of the courtyard, Mei Lin approached. Her steps were slow but deliberate, her long robes swaying gently with each movement. The fabric catching the light and shifting in shades as it moved. The faint breeze played with a loose strand of her hair. But her gaze never wavered. When her eyes met Shanyong's, there was no need for words. In that single look, a deep understanding passed between them, a silent promise of the path they had already chosen long before their feet set upon it. They shared a single, almost imperceptible nod, one that carried the weight of trust and resolve. Without speaking, they turned and began walking side by side. The village beyond the courtyard was already awake. Merchants called out to passers-by, their voices blending into a tapestry of sound. The clinking of coins, the laughter of children darting between stalls, the scent of freshly baked bread mixing with the salty tang of dried fish. Yet Shanyong and Mei Lin moved through it all like shadows, untouched by the lively chaos, their focus fixed on something far beyond the narrow streets. They paused at a modest tea stall where an old vendor, his back slightly bent with age, greeted them with a warm smile. He poured tea into small worn porcelain cups, the steam curling upward in delicate wisps. Shanyong lifted his cup, taking a slow sip. The tea was fragrant and earthy, its warmth spreading through him like a brief touch of home, a fleeting moment of comfort before the road ahead. Their journey led them to the towering gates of a great red temple. The wood was carved with intricate patterns, dragons coiled in eternal motion, warriors frozen mid-strike. Each groove in detail worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Shanyong's hand lingered on the surface, feeling the quiet pulse of history under his fingertips. Inside, the air was heavy with incense, each breath tasting faintly of sandalwood. From the shadows emerged a monk, his robes plain but immaculate, his voice deep and measured. He spoke of trials that would test their will, of sacrifices that would demand more than courage alone. Shanyong listened in silence, his expression unchanging, though the weight of the monk's words settled in his chest. When they stepped outside, the sky had shifted. Streaks of grey stretched across the horizon. And the wind had a sharper bite to it. Mei Lin drew her cloak tighter around her shoulders, while Shanyong pressed on, his eyes fixed ahead as if already seeing what lay beyond the clouds. By nightfall, they reached the edge of a cliff. Below them, the valley spread out endlessly, a sea of shadows under the silver wash of moonlight. The wind howled around them, tugging at their clothes. But they stood still, drawing strength from the vast silence. The forest welcomed them with moonlight filtering through its dense canopy, turning the leaves above into shimmering silver. Each step was careful, measured, and the occasional call of a distant owl marked the slow passage of time. They stopped at a small campfire that crackled softly against the night's stillness. Mei Lin, her voice quiet, finally spoke of her fears, the dangers ahead, the uncertainty of their mission. Shanyong said nothing, but the steady look in his eyes was enough to remind her she was not alone. Days later, the mountain pass loomed before them. Its jagged peaks vanished into swirling clouds, and the air was thin enough that each breath felt precious. The narrow path along the mountainside demanded absolute focus. Loose stones shifted underfoot, and the drop beside them fell into an endless black void. But their pace never faltered. Each step was a quiet defiance of the danger. Through the storm, the silhouette of an enemy fortress emerged, a jagged shadow against a raging sky. Lightning illuminated its walls, and Shanyong's resolve only hardened. Inside the fortress, chaos exploded. The clang of steel against steel rang out, echoing through narrow corridors. Shanyong fought with calculated precision, each strike fueled by purpose. Mei Lin moved beside him like a whisper of wind, her strikes swift and deadly. Without speaking, they protected each other, flowing together in battle as though sharing a single mind. The fight lasted through the night, each moment stretching into eternity. Shanyong's muscles burned with exhaustion, but he refused to slow. Every swing of his blade carried the weight of the lives depending on them. At dawn, silence fell. The fortress lay in ruin, smoke curling into the pale sky. Survivors stood amidst the wreckage, stunned by the quiet after so much chaos. Shanyong's breath came heavy, but his eyes were already searching the horizon. Mei Lin touched his arm lightly. "It's over," she whispered. But he only shook his head, the faintest smile touching his lips. "No, this is only the beginning." They walked away together, the rising sun casting their long shadows behind them. A silent vow that the journey was far from over. The path carried them through a quiet meadow, where wildflowers swayed in rhythm with the wind. For a fleeting moment, the weight of past battles seemed lighter. At a riverbank, Shanyong knelt to wash his hands. The water was icy, rushing over his skin, carrying away the faint trace of dried blood. Mei Lin watched the ripples move downstream, as though they were carrying away the shadows of their struggles. They passed through a small hilltop village. The people greeted them with warm smiles, offering bread and shelter. Though weary, they declined, driven by the pull of an unseen destination. As night fell, lanterns lit the narrow path ahead, their glow cutting small circles of light through the darkness. Faintly, the sound of drums carried across the valley. A festival filled the next town. Children ran between stalls, laughing, while dancers moved gracefully around a roaring fire. Mei Lin allowed herself the smallest smile, soaking in the fleeting joy. Shanyong stood at a distance, his gaze fixed on the flames. No matter how bright the fire burned, he could not forget the dangers waiting beyond this night. The following morning, a heavy mist rolled in, swallowing the landscape in pale grey. They could barely see beyond a few steps, yet their pace did not slow. Through the fog, an ancient stone bridge emerged, its arches weathered and moss-covered. Crossing it felt like stepping into a place untouched by time. Beyond lay a dense forest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig drew Mei Lin's hand toward her blade. They stumbled upon ruins deep in the woods, stone walls half collapsed, carvings worn but still telling stories of a kingdom long gone. In the heart of the ruins stood a sealed door, its lock old but masterfully crafted. Shanyong examined it, sensing it guarded something beyond mere stone. After hours of careful work, the door creaked open to reveal a hidden chamber bathed in golden light. Scrolls untouched for centuries lay waiting. Mei Lin unrolled one, scanning the faded ink. They speak of a weapon," she murmured. Shanyong's expression grew grim. They left the ruins with the scrolls carefully wrapped, the forest around them seeming heavier now, as if it knew the weight of what they carried. That night under a canopy of stars, Shanyong stared into the fire, lost in thought. Mei Lin slept lightly, her rest troubled by dreams. At dawn, they were ambushed, shadows burst from the trees, blades flashing in the morning light. Shanyong's sword met steel in an instant. Mei Lin fought like flowing water, her strikes smooth yet unyielding. Together they drove their attackers back into the darkness. Breathing heavily, Shanyong cleaned his blade. "They knew about the scrolls," he said. Mei Lin nodded silently. The days that followed were a blur of tense travel. Every shadow felt like an enemy waiting to strike. They reached a mountain village where an elder greeted them. His gaze lingered on the scrolls before he invited them inside. By the fire, the elder spoke of an ancient prophecy, of a war yet to come, and the role they were destined to play. When they left, his words still echoed in their minds. The mountains ahead rose like jagged teeth into the clouds. Snow began to fall, at first gentle, then quickly heavier, covering the path in white. Their breath came in misty clouds. At the summit, they found a lonely shrine, half buried in snow. Inside, a single candle flickered, though no one was there to tend it. Mei Lin lit incense and bowed her head. Shanyong stood behind her, letting the quiet sink into his bones. Descending into a wide valley, the grass whispered under the wind. In the distance stood a fortress, larger and darker than the first. Torches lined its walls, banners snapping in the cold air. By nightfall, they stood before its gates. Shanyong tightened his armor straps. Mei Lin checked the edge of her blades. The battle came fast and fierce. Steel rang in the darkness. Voices shouted in rage and pain. And the ground trembled under their feet. At the fortress's heart, they faced its commander, a towering figure in black armor. The fight was brutal, each strike testing their limits. At last, with one final perfect blow, Shanyong struck him down. Silence fell again, the wind carrying away the last echoes of battle.